Yes, we have reached the dreaded and inevitable zone of struggling with a subject or multiple subjects or concepts or specific curriculum. So, what's a homeschool mom? What should she do? Should she force the child to continue on? Should she just throw her hands up in the air and give up and toss it aside? Or should she lean in for the real lessons that this can teach her and it can teach the child? The answer to the question is in today's episode.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
If not today, or maybe not this year, it will eventually happen, and you will have a child who is struggling with one specific subject, or maybe a few subjects, or homeschooling in general. And it can be so easy to just toss in the towel. But this situation offers a really good opportunity for a few things that I see that can be a positive outcome. And I'm going to share about that in this episode. To say that in my homeschool that I experienced this with a homeschooler struggling in certain subjects, to say that we did that would be an understatement. Honestly, we had it happen many times, and it made me question, should I quit homeschool? Am I not cut out for this? Is my child not cut out for this? Are we not compatible to learn together, to educate at home? Because when a kiddo is struggling, it makes it hard. It makes homeschool hard. And when things are hard, sometimes we think the solution is to quit. Did you listen to the episode where I talked about quitting homeschooling? If you did not, you need to do that. I will drop the link for it in the show notes because you need to listen definitely to that if you are feeling like this is a sign that we shouldn't be homeschooling. If there's a struggle, if it's hard, we shouldn't be homeschooling. No, that's could actually be the opposite. When we struggle, when we have hard things, we can lean in. We can, and I'm going to give you some specific tactical ideas and tips on really what to do here, but it does not mean that you need to quit. And just know that all of us have encountered this. Think of the homeschool mom that you know that's graduated all her kids. Think of even all the amazing homeschool moms that share about their life. Think of somebody like Sally Clarkson. She is just, I love Sally. And it was so cool to be able to meet her earlier in October. I went to a conference in Pennsylvania and was able to meet her and just talk to her face to face. And that was just so neat for me. But just think about Sally Clarkson. Maybe you read her books. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go and grab one of her books. But to think that she didn't struggle and her kids didn't struggle at all, that would be a silly thing to think of. We all do. Even the most amazing homeschool mom that you know in real life or you know online, we all run into this. And so you're not alone. But it's what we do with that. It's always what we do when we are presented with a situation, we are presented with something that doesn't feel good, that's maybe a negative, that something is hard. It's always what we do with it is what counts the most. So, how can we lean into this situation, into these circumstances, into this time that you're just like this season where you're just like, this is not feeling good? I am not flying high with my homeschool anymore. Please keep in mind that this situation can be more about the character of your child than the actual subject. Look at this time as a way of possibly pouring into some habit training and pouring into some attitude training. Hard things and negative attitudes and negative situations and struggling with something is actually at the root revealing a heart issue. And it's also revealing an area of possible refinement for your child. possibly also for you, in how do you respond when this child is struggling or crying or grumbling or giving you a bad attitude. Let's just throw it out there and say it's possibly with math. Math seems to be the subject that trips up a lot of kids at some point, whether it is them working on memorizing their math facts and really understanding that concept and being able to spit out really easily 4 plus 5 equals 9 and, all of the math facts, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It tends to be an area that kids can struggle in at some point. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's not even, they're fine with that and they get to high school and the hard things and they're just struggling and the attitude comes out. Let's look at this a time where we can do some refining in your own life, when things have been hard, when there's been negative circumstances, think about the refining that God has done in your life. Think about the sanctification. Think about the wisdom that you have gained on the other side of that. Same thing with the kids. So we can, as I mentioned earlier, this could be a great opportunity for learning some habit training. And I did do an episode with Sonia Schaefer from Simply Charlotte Mason. It was a phenomenal episode, all about habit training. And not that it always talked about curriculum and stuff like that, but just overall, I encourage you to listen to it. I'll drop it in the link for it in the show notes for you. But we can use this as a time to learn about habits. We can also use this as a time to learn about our attitude and our character and how we should respond. And this takes time. It takes time for kids. It takes maturity for them. And so the meltdown that a first grader has over, say, a math problem is going to be different than a 10th grader is going to have over it. So a young child and a teen are going to have a different reaction to it. And so even though maybe as a young child in maybe 6, 7 years old, and you thought you had worked through this attitude when it comes to and the negativity when it comes to math, you thought you worked through it, and then it rears its ugly head again 10 years later, and they're 16 years old. And it just means that there's just a different way that we can steer them, and they have more wisdom and they have more maturity at that point at 16. So it just looks different with that character training. And you'll want to listen to that episode that I did about character training and just answered all kinds of questions that I have gotten about that. And that link will be in the show notes as well. If you feel like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to work on giving them a better attitude about things and working and developing and showing them how God can work the fruit of the Spirit in their life as well and how that can be revealed. So, a lot of this struggle can just be a revealing of really what's in their heart and how they react to things. And we can talk through it and work through it. If you decide that this struggle that they're having with this subject or multiple subjects or just with homeschool in general, if you say, okay, I think this is something, this is an attitude, something, this is character, this is habit training that we need to do, I want to encourage you that this is then the habit training and the character training that you're doing. So it's not saying adding this to the other reproof and training you are doing. So maybe you have some habits that you are trying to learn at home and you might need to put those aside for this might be a bigger one that you need to focus on. When we are maybe working already with a child that is working on, maybe you're working through a season of life where they are lying a lot. I feel like every kid goes through that at some point where they're just natural answer to anything is a lie. And so you're working on that. Well, maybe it's not the right time to bring up a second character training when it comes to the negativity, when it comes to, homeschool subjects and stuff. Maybe wait until you kind of gotten through that. Or maybe you're working on something, you're like, okay, that can be put aside because I see that this is more important for us to work through the character and the attitude and the diligence that they need to do hard things with this subject that they are struggling with. So don't pile it on top of things you're already doing because you're just going to overwhelm them and they're going to start to feel beaten down. Now, what if it's not necessarily a deeper heart issue or anything? It could possibly be the curriculum or the resource that you are using. So make sure that whatever you are using, so let's go to the math, make sure what you are using is not exasperating them, is not overwhelming them. Check if it is working with their natural inclinations to learn. Maybe they are doing a math curriculum that's completely online and that is just so distracting. The lights and everything just kind of gets them wound up. And it would be better for them just to do some type of math on paper. Or maybe it's just a math program and you are making them do every single problem and there are 30 problems to do a day. That is exasperating them. I would be exasperated by that. I would be like, really? I have to do all of this again? And so every day they're doing this over and over again, and they start to not see the point in doing every single problem. And if you want them to do every problem, you need to explain to them why it's important for them to do every single problem. I'd love to hear the explanation too. If you have an explanation for doing all 30 to 40 problems every single day, let me know. I'll let you know if it passes the sniff test on that. So check to see if what you're using is actually what's going to appeal to them and help them to learn well. And so you can focus on learning styles. And I remember doing that a lot when they were in the younger years, really focused on, okay, what is their learning style and trying to meet that, their learning style. And then as they got older, I just wanted to expose them to a lot of different learning styles and to really understand them and maybe what their natural ability was, like where they leaned towards, but then also showing them how to learn well a different way. So maybe a child learns very well from an auditory. So they're an auditory learner and they like to listen to things. But you're like, I really want you to learn also just by like a visual learner, by reading something. And so you teach them then how to be able to kind of put aside their natural wanting to listen to a book and to actually sit and read a book. So really have to be it's important to make sure that what resource you are using that isn't the source of the problem. When they are younger, I would highly recommend just putting in that aside and finding a different resource to come alongside them. If they're older, it might just be like, hey, let's learn to figure this out because maybe they're going to go on to college. And when you go on to college, and if you're given some type of textbook and you're like, nah, I don't really learn like this. I don't really like the way this is set up. Guess what the professor's going to say? They might laugh at you and they'll say, tough luck. You're going to have to figure it out, kid. And so as they get older, it's like, okay, this is the resource that we are given. So if they're in high school and they are on a college track, you're like, this is the resource you're given. We have to learn. You have to learn. You get to teach them how to actually learn from whatever the resource is. And that will serve them really well in college and even beyond, even if they're not going to college, but especially in the younger years. If it is causing more trouble, stop it. Stop doing that curriculum and find something that is going to work better for you. If you're like, well, I already bought this math curriculum, then there's an episode I did about finding curriculum and doing things on a budget. I would recommend that you find a friend that maybe you can borrow something with, but go listen to that episode as well. So, what if in the situation you're like, this is a curriculum we have, this is what we're going to do, and I know that it's okay for you. They just have a bad attitude. And so you're like, how can I make this work? One of the things that I did for many years is that I would give them the freedom to choose the order of their subjects to a degree. This is during the years when I had three of them and I had lessons to do for specific subjects, and I would bounce around from one to another. So, to a degree, they could kind of decide. But if I'm doing math lessons and I did math lessons for child one and two, well, guess what, child three? It is your turn for a math lesson right now. But I would let them then do what they wanted to in whatever order. And I found that a lot of times they prefer to do their least favorite subjects first. It's kind of like when you have dinner and there's a couple of things on your dinner plate, and you're the person who decides, I'm going to eat I'm going to eat the vegetables first 'cause I don't really like vegetables, and I'm going to save the fruit or the starch or carbs or whatever for last because that's my favorite. And so it was the same thing with a homeschool. I would then let them pick what they're going to do, and a lot of times they were like, I'm just going to get the least favorite subject done first. Sometimes that was math, sometimes that was language art. So, but it wasn't always like that. And sometimes they would put off the subject that they didn't want to do in hopes that maybe I would say, the day's done. You don't have to do it anymore. But guess what? As they got older, they started to realize that it's better just to get it done and to move on. So again, this is also just a maturity thing and learning like, well, this is the math and there's nothing wrong with this math and you can learn it well. And if you just put your mind to it, because sometimes this is a mind thing. It is just a decision that the child has made. They're not going to like this subject, that they're not going to like this resource. And I've had that experience as well, especially with my boys when it came to writing. They're like, I don't like to write. I don't want to write, and just had a bad attitude about it. And some years I would just put it off. I was like, you know what? I do not have the margin to really dig in deep. And then eventually I'd be like, okay, we really have to do this well. And I would try to find a curriculum or some type of resource that they would enjoy, and then maybe writing prompts and things. And I'll be honest and tell you that I put off the writing, like a lot of formal writing. I don't know. Maybe shouldn't admit to this with my boys for quite a few years. And they got to high school and they're like, oh, okay, this is not so bad anymore. And they would do their writing. And guess what? Some of them will have graduated from high school without necessarily doing a deep research or reading Shakespeare or anything like that. Because guess what? They're out in the world, and if they want to read Shakespeare, they can. And I can guarantee you that some of my kids will never read Shakespeare, and they don't need to, and that's okay. So sometimes there is just the bad attitude about doing the things, and we need to work through that. And that goes back to the attitude and character training. But sometimes that you can just put things aside. And I have done that as well. We have all done that. And if a homeschool mom says she did not, then she's probably lying to you. Or maybe she hasn't found that balance between being organized and flexible that we talked about in episode 306, the one right before this. One last thing I want to leave you with. If you are saying, okay, I've tried all of these things and it just is not working, maybe look into doing some type of reward system to help get them motivated initially. I am not against that. I know that maybe some families are against that, but it doesn't mean that it has to be something forever. You aren't still going to be giving out whatever the reward is, stickers or whatever it is, for years and years of their life. They will then, hopefully, the goal is that by the teen years, they have the internal motivation to work hard and to accomplish things, knowing that it's going to serve them well in their future life, and knowing that also, well, in their future, not their future life, but in their future. But knowing also that as they get older, we need to justify some things to them, like say, this is why we're going to do this. I had to do that many times, especially with my boys. They wanted to push back. They're like, well, why do I need to know? Again, why do I need to know how to write? We might actually be writing some things. And maybe you're not going to write a dissertation someday, but you might write a business plan. So let's practice and see what that actually looks like. But going back to the reward system, it's okay to try that. And maybe it won't work. Or actually, it maybe will work really well. And you'll say, huh, I didn't know that just having a simple sticker on the chart on the refrigerator that daddy sees when he gets home from work would be what would motivate them, what would be what to get them out of that negative zone and the funk that they have been in for however long this has been going on. And just know that your 18, 19, 20-year-old son, daughter is not going to be looking for stickers from mom in order to have them go to their job or to complete their courses that they're doing online or at a local college or going away to college or whatever their plans are. They're not going to need your stickers, just like they're not going to move out of the house still in diapers or anything. They are not going to need that. So I encourage you to check it out. There are some great systems, and we have used things over the years, and my kids remember them. And guess what? They don't need them anymore. So they will grow out of that. But I hope that this episode has encouraged you. If this episode has, and if this podcast encourages you and helps motivate you and helps you to know that you aren't alone and helps you to keep going with homeschooling, I would love to be able to hear about that. I would love for you to be able to share how this podcast has impacted you so that other homeschool moms, when they come along the podcast, they're like, huh, all right, I'll give it a try, and they'll give it a listen. So you can do that by leaving a rating and review. The review especially really helps things out. The review is where you just write out, can just be a sentence or two. That would just be amazing. So go ahead and scroll to the bottom of your podcast app and leave that rating and review to encourage me and to encourage other homeschool moms. But have a blessed day, and I promise to be back here on the podcast after the weekend.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.